Managing health and safety risks requires the identification of what might cause harm or loss to people or facilities, an evaluation of what is being done to prevent such mishap, and the implementation of additional controls, where required, to ensure that the risks remain under control. This risk assessment process is central to any safety management system. It is the means by which we identify hazards and evaluate risks. Consider how it fits within the context of the plan, do, check, act framework for managing safety described within HSE guidance. Plan. Risk assessment is a proactive process whereby hazards are identified and prioritized. This enables employers to plan the implementation of controls. Do. This is the stage where actions are taken to ensure that employees and others are protected safe so far as reasonably practicable. Doing this includes allocating responsibilities for risk assessment and implementing control measures. Check. This is a process where we measure our performance. Measuring performance will ensure that the precautions implemented as a result of risk assessment are implemented and appropriate. Act. Activities should be reviewed against the risk assessment findings to ensure that all hazards were correctly identified and that any new hazards have been properly identified and assessed. Risks and safety have an inverse relation. When safety controls are weak, risk will high and strong. When safety controls are strong, then risk will become low and weak. Therefore, to control the risk, safety controls shall be appropriate, sufficient, and strong so that risk could become as low as reasonably practical. Identify the hazards. This is the process of identifying all the significant hazards that high potential of injure or harm. One approach is to take each task and break it down into steps, assessing the hazards associated with each step. Who might be harmed and how? This is the process of determining who may be at risk from the hazards, the groups of staff and others likely to be affected. Evaluate the risks and decide on precautions. The term risk can be defined as the likelihood of harm and severity of the accident. Action planning. The risk assessment matrix provides the results of the risk rating using likelihood times severity and gives a rough guide to the size of the risk. The risk rating should now be considered and converted into an internal action plan indicating priorities for action. Record your findings. The significant findings of the assessment must be recorded, including the hazards and risk controls, and kept. Review your assessments and revise, as a result of new or modifications of existing equipment, building alterations, new procedures, new or modified products. The risk assessment shall be reviewed. Hazard is any object, situation, an action that has the potential to trigger an accident and may harm the person and/or damage to property or environment. Every hazard, regardless of its size, has a likelihood of occurrence of incident and severity of the outcome of the incident. The combination of two factors, likelihood and severity, determines the degree of the risk posed by a certain hazard. Risk evaluation is a process where we find the likelihood and give a number from 1-5, and also we find the severity and give a number from 1-5, followed by multiplying both numbers and reaching the risk value. Take an example in a given situation where we estimate the likelihood of happening the incident is 3, and if an incident happens, the outcome of the incident could be a serious injury that is rate 4 as severity. Risk equals likelihood x severity. Risk equals 3 by 4 equals 12. Followed by comparing this value to the risk matrix. Any type. If some unwanted event happens, there might be three types of outcome. Incident, near miss. An unwanted event occurred but the outcome of the event is no injury or no damage. This is an incident called near miss. Accident. An unwanted event happens, the outcome of the everything may be an injury, damage, or both. In this case it is called an accident. Hazards are anything or any situation that has the potential to cause harm, injury, or damage to the property. Different types of hazards are generated by the following things: locations, people, materials, and machines. These may be called the mother of all hazards. Hazards are generated by any of the above things, and hazards have a degree of likelihood of making an incident if someone interacts with them. Having the likelihood will trigger the incident, and every incident will have some consequence which can be graded as minor, medium, high. The likelihood is rated -5 from low to high, and also consequences are rated 1/5 from low to high. Then the risk is calculated by the combination of likelihood and consequence. Risk equals likelihood x consequences. L equals 3 and C equals 4. R equals 3 by 4 equals 12. Hazards are existing everywhere in the workplace. All hazards have some degree of likelihood of occurring. Having the likelihood will trigger the incident, and every incident will have some outcome of the incident. The outcome could be one of the following. The incident occurred but no harm or injury or damage due to any reason. These is classified as near-miss accidents. The incident occurred and the worker sustained a personal injury but no damage to property. This classified as an injury accident. The incident occurred and damaged property but no personal injury. This is classified as a damage accident. The incident occurred, personal injury sustains, and damage to the property happens. This will be classified as an accident with property damage and personal injury. The incident occurred, which resulted in sickness or ill health occurred. This will be classified as a health incident. The incident occurred, which resulted in a fatal injury. This will be classified as a fatal accident. The incident occurred, regardless of its outcome. This incident has to be reported to government authorities. This will be classified as a dangerous occurrence. Generic assessments are assessments produced once only for a given activity or type of workplace. For example, where a company has several locations where the same activity is carried out, a single generic assessment could be done for that activity to cover all the locations. Similarly, if a company has employees who work away from the base, such as electricians, then generic assessments can be used for their hazardous work rather than attempting to produce a task-based risk assessment for each activity at each location. Whilst this method of assessment has significant benefits in terms of practicability and time saving, there is a major drawback that must be considered. The application of the risk control measures as identified from the generic assessment is dependent on the task actually being carried out exactly as it was assessed. Any variation in working methods, materials, or equipment may have a significant impact on the assessment of risk and the required level of protection required. Therefore, it is essential that operators and supervisors are provided with training on the effective use of generic assessments and what actions to take when situations differ from the one assessed. Field employees who face such safety issues will therefore require training in identifying, analyzing, and controlling risk at the time it presents itself. These types of assessments are said to be called dynamic risk assessments. Dynamic risk assessments rely on the development of generic assessments covering the known hazards and risks associated with the task. Avoiding risks not using the material, for example toxic chemicals, or carrying out the activity, for example excavations, eliminates the need for control. Evaluating the risks that cannot be avoided. For these risks a suitable and sufficient risk assessment must be carried out. Combating the risks at source. Control the risk as close to the point of operation where the hazard is being produced. Adapting the work to the individual. This measure requires the employer to carefully consider ergonomic principles and design the work to suit the person. Adapting to technical progress. Many risks disappear from the workplace as better processes and methods are introduced. Replacing the dangerous with the non-dangerous or the less dangerous mean reduction of risks. Developing a coherent overall prevention policy. This embodies the principles of risk management and requires the employer to look at all aspects of the health and safety management system rather than simply concentrating on basic workplace precautions. Giving collective protective measures priority. As apply the holistic approach for the controls, priority should be given to collective measures over individual protective measures. Giving appropriate instructions to employees. This covers specific and general instructions, including the use of signs, training, and supervision. The hierarchical approach provides a structured hierarchy to help with the selection of control measures based on the desired protection required for differing levels of risk, where the control measures at the top of the hierarchy would be considered before other, less effective measures at the lower end of the scale. Elimination or substitution. This is often the most effective way of avoiding the serious risk of harm. It needs a total removal of hazards. Substitution means to replace the hazard for less harmful material. Use of barriers. This option is achieved by introducing engineering controls. Isolation, segregation, barricades, preventing the contacts are common ways of implementing these controls. Procedures and systems of work. This option require the development of safe working practices and procedures. Training, information, and supervision. Having a competent workforce is a fundamental safety requirement. This way of control includes many things such as training, awareness, and similar other things that improve the behavior of the workers. Personal protective equipment is the last for protection of residual risks. In practice, it might be technically possible to achieve total elimination of a hazard. The costs involved, and the benefits achieved may mean that it does not pass the test of reasonably practicable. The methods shown later in the list of control measures are usually the cheapest options. They can be put into operation very quickly, and give some measure of risk reduction, but their effect is often of short duration. Financial. The main problem with making improvements in safety is that there is little, if any, perceivable financial gain. Another financial issue that may put a constraint on any risk reduction program is a conflict of priorities. Conflict of priorities. Where finances are restricted and budgets have been set for the coming period, a decision has to be made on what gets priority. It is often a case of making compromises and accepting that everything cannot be done today. Management perceptions. It is a fact that even today, many managers see health and safety as a waste of time and money, or just pay no attention to it whatsoever. Resistance to change. One of those other tasks mentioned above is convincing people that the changes that you are advocating are for their benefit. Very few people like change when the advantages are not obvious. Time. As mentioned before, not everything can be achieved today. Probably the second biggest constraint facing safety professionals, after money, is time. Benefits of risk assessment: an improved health and safety culture with managers taking a proactive approach to risk and safety management. Fewer accidents, and less lost time through ill health. Where the working conditions within an organization have improved, these would seem to be the obvious benefits. These, in turn, will lead to fewer insurance claims and possibly lower premiums.